break. I've got to play some spots, and then we've got through till the news at 5.
We're about to go live with a gentleman called Andrew, and we're going to talk about music therapy for elderly people.
Oh, good. That person.
All the fun types of things you can do at the circus. We have spinning plates, juggling balls, flower sticks, actually things that are actually quite easy to learn a few things on.
What are those riding crops over there? What do you use those for?
Those are flower sticks. They roll up and down your arm. You can do flips and all sorts of tricks with those.
Well, in the studio with us this afternoon, we've got Andrew Dyce. And I think I'll cut to the chase here. Andrew, could you just introduce yourself to our listeners?
I sure can. I am Andrew Dyce. I'm a music therapist. I did start as a music therapist. That's something that's grown as a part of my business over the last couple of years, and it was something that I started as almost a hobby, and it's just with such great demand for that particular service, it's built up into something that I couldn't even imagine a couple of years ago even. So.
Right, and this is Sing Us a Song, is it, what you're talking
This
about?
is Sing Us a Song.
And what is that?
It's a music therapy service for aged care that caters to a particular style of music therapy, which is very contemporary, and that is using instruments, and basically we call it interactive music therapy. So it plays on the fact that all residents and anyone attending, even staff, are required to get involved, and it creates a whole aspect of movement as well as singing, and it's not a passive experience, which is really good. So it has so many other benefits for each resident and person involved.
So this is for residents of aged care centres?
It is, yes. So we cater to, at the moment, we started with just one facility by itself, and word of mouth spread, and now we cater to around 18 facilities around Sydney. So.
Wow, so it has been quite popular. So just run us through, what would you actually do? We
run sessions for an hour at a time, because that's generally the amount of attention span we can muster.
That's about mine.
and we give instruments and different percussion instruments to the residents and ask them to not only sing along to old songs that they remember, that help them bring back their memory and reminisce, but also get involved with the rhythm and aspects of the songs as well. And it creates a nice whole body movement experience for them, which is really good for their mobility, and it's really good for their mental health as well.
So obviously people are responding to this.
They are responding much more than I could even imagine when I started, and I was very new into this, being a musician by trade and coming into the music therapy field. I guess later in my 20s, I was surprised at how responsive the residents are, particularly for remembering family after these experiences, because it sets your brain up to be very responsive and very, it can send, we call it musical triggers. So it triggers the brain, and its different aspects of the music essentially will mean that when a resident listens to something that they remember, they also remember other aspects of their life from the past, and it's really a lovely thing to see that when family are so happy to, we invite family along to these experiences as well, and they join in, and they often stay and talk, and the residents are much more responsive after the hour than before they start.
Right, because, getting into the personal here, when you get to a certain age, and I'm approaching that, what you see in front of you is your life starting to dissipate. I mean, Alzheimer's is a curse, isn't it? To have not just, your personality and your memories start to dissolve and not be able to do something about it, and this directly treats this.
Well, I actually have family members with Alzheimer's as well, so it's close to home for me, and I really do think there is a extreme benefit for these type of services and programs in each aged care facility.
Because there's a lot of work done on neuroscience now, particularly about the effect of music on
the brain.
Yeah,
that's right. And there's been a lot of studies, particularly pioneering, not necessarily just in Australia, but overseas as well, in other different countries at universities around the globe. I see there's, Oliver Sacks is very famous as an advocate for dementia and music therapy, and there's a lovely quote that we've pulled up here. Perhaps most remarkably, people with Alzheimer's disease and other dementias can respond to music when nothing else reaches them, and it's very true. It can facilitate a lot of other benefits for them that they essentially have forgotten.
Okay, and I have remembered that it's now 22, and we're going to play a few station messages, and we're going to be back, and we're going to talk about what take do you want to take into the old folks' home?
All Australians who are homeless are under the age of 25.
Oh, this is my ad.
Young people often end up on the streets.
It's interesting because in Korea,
This is you.
this is me. Yes, I said this is my ad. In Korea, like the music for not so much for like dementia and Alzheimer's, but for old people, it's a big industry over there. So I often visited like a friend of mine. She was in the K-pop industry, I
Yep.
guess, and like 5 levels below her was this big hall that like all these elderly people would go and dance to, and just to keep them up and moving and whatnot.
Occupied and basically
occupied, yeah.
keep
Because the elderly generation in Korea are pretty much forgotten a lot of the time, and so yeah, it's. I'm just trying to thought it was like, I mean, music is an international language. I guess it's also a language that can, like, it's
that's
dementia, like it can get through no matter what. It's just a rhythm. It's just a beat.
That's right, and that's one of the things I'm going to talk about soon. Actually, is the fact that we're so multicultural here in Australia that you can have people of different language and backgrounds, and they all understand.
Do we
this.
want to go there next?
I think it's a great topic. I mean, if we can.
Okay.
I could talk for hours, but I just want to try and keep
No,
it condensed for you.
you talk for hours.
I almost like hearing my own voice.
I prefer it when I have to shut you up rather than prompt.
All right. Well, you probably will at some point in the biggest.
Okay, so how do we frame that question? All right, changing
The social aspects of it, I guess, like how it brings different people that wouldn't necessarily talk together. I think that's
all right.
aspect.
Yeah, universal.
And if it's relevant, I could segue into. I've got some numbers of how many people get dementia per day and things like that.
Yeah, fantastic.
Okay, well, why don't we go? So we'll do the cultural thing, and then we'll come back
The
to the
social
numbers.
economic side of it. Yeah.
Okay.
I've lost you again on the screen.
That's right, I'll come forward.
I can't instead of you.
Well, we're talking to Andrew Dyce from Sing Us a Song Music Therapy. The thing about the construction of Australian society now is that it is increasingly multicultural, and so we must get this input into our aged care facilities now, where there are multicultural residents in there. How does music cut across this?
Well, it's actually a good. I'd call it the universal icebreaker. Is a nice way of putting it. The music therapy, in a sense, can mean that people that don't usually socialise together in these aged care, because you've got to think it's very daunting for someone to be put into an aged care residence with other people when most of the time they've lived in their own home with a loved one, and that, or even sometimes by themselves for a very long period of time. So it's very hard for them to come out of their shell, and these sessions are really tailored for them to basically use music even as a way to socialize with the people around them. And that's why we use the shakers and the musical instruments, because it means that they can basically sing along to something and shake along to something that the person next to them also knows from a different background and experience. And even if they don't know the words, even if English isn't their first language, we have a music therapist that has just started working with my company that specializes in Latin music. So, you know, we're trying to tailor for different backgrounds, and it's really something that helps make people happy. And that is I think the well-being part is really emphasis of this all. There's a lot of medical benefits to this, even neurological benefits, but the fact that if you get someone into a good mood, they are more likely to be responsive.
It's fascinating. I did when I knew you were coming on the show. I was quite fascinated by this husbands and worked time doing community service up in Cairns,
Lovely.
and they it was inclusive. So
That's beautiful.
and so
Yeah.
it was really good. And congratulations on what you do. I had a look online, and you've been to a lot of local places: North Rocks, Warunga House, Regis Hornsby, Hooper St Ives, and North Rocks, Avalon House. Mole and Kellyville and Arcare Warriewood, and that was all around the 14th of October. You had
That was just 1 week.
Yeah, 1 week. So
So-
that's a huge effort. But when I heard you were coming onto the show, I started thinking about the social and the economic costs of dementia, and I looked, and I always get dementia, Alzheimer's mixed up. I typed in Alzheimer's, and all the statistics came up for dementia. So I'm not a medical person, so I won't go down that path.
Sure.
But even so, that there are 244 new cases of dementia each day.
Wow.
And they reckon it's going to go up to 650 per day by 2056. So I'll be 96 by then. It'll probably be me as well. And over the next 40 years, they reckon there's going to be 6.5 million people diagnosed with dementia. I don't know if that was Australia-wide or worldwide, but that was the Australian Dementia Society. So I was sort of fascinated by those figures. So the work you're doing to actually just get people into the space where they can sort of start to recollect something has got to be good for them, let alone the social economic costs of, what we need to do as a society with these sorts of numbers.
That's right. I mean, the figures you just presented there are. It's not that surprising, even though if you were away from this field, it might sort of be a bit shocking. But it's with the amount of places that are even getting built to this day within the Sydney region, aged care places that facilitate specifically to dementia care is astounding.
Did any of you see the program on one of the news channels this week about a dementia village set up between Brisbane and the Sunshine
Yes, I
Coast?
caught bits of it. Yeah.
Yeah, that was fascinating. So it was a whole village that was obviously it must have sort of, I don't know how it's set up, but there were about 5 people living in a house, and they had a carer in the house. It was a whole village. It had hairdressers and social activities and the rest of it. So obviously it's contained, I would assume, to a certain extent. But the sort of oblique 45-degree angle shot of it was fascinating.
It's fantastic. I mean, well-being in dementia care is probably something that's really come to the forefront very recently. And with music programs and other things that they do in these facilities basically it's all about enabling someone to live with dementia in the most normal way possible for them.
Tell me, Andrew, you said this is a business and you came into it via being a musician. I'm aware of art therapy at university courses and that. Are there any music therapy courses and things like that to sort of build a whole course of people coming through behind you to add to this?
There are plenty. And I tackled this from a completely different background, being a musician. I actually am very still active in the musician side of the Sydney music scene as well. So I cater to every demographic. If you looked at it that way, I play to people of all ages.
All ages, but you style yourself as the piano man. So what sort of venues do you play where it's just you and a piano?
That's my by-night trade. That's my cape wearing.
Look, I just can't help thinking of Lost in Translation and and the scene in the piano bar there with Bill Murray and the
right. Yeah, it's a nice analogy there.
Just moving on from that, though, there is research coming out of Macquarie Uni. Probably Siobhan knows this person, where they're saying, they did this research where they said if you clapped a set of headphones on someone with Alzheimer's and played music that they would have heard between the ages of 15 and 25, then they immediately respond.
I'd say it's almost a certainty that is in fact true, because people, and that's why there's a lot of studies into reminiscence and creating atmospheres which will help people recollect.
Atmospheres, that's an interesting use of the word, isn't it?
I think it is an atmosphere. If I can create a whole, I guess, atmosphere, I'll use that word again, for any resident involved, including the staff that participate. I encourage them to help participate and keep things moving for all the residents. If I can create that feeling for anyone that suffers from dementia, then they are more likely to respond because it's more comfortable for them. And that's the key word here, comfort, because if I am comfortable in my own skin, I don't feel frightened, I don't feel lost, like a lot of these patients do. If I can feel something, like if a song can bring me back to something that makes me feel happy and comfortable, that's really enables me then to be myself and do things that I usually wouldn't do. And a lot of these patients exhibit these, I guess, almost uncharacteristic expressions during this music therapy that you wouldn't see 23 hours in the day with them, because this music helps them feel like, I know this song, and I'm confident I know this song, which means I'm confident about other things, and I'm going to be confident, and I'm going to be comfortable.
And I remember the feelings I had when I heard that song.
That's it.
Because if I was to think of it myself, and we'll bring in the rest of the panel here, is that if I think of the music I was listening to between the ages of 15 to 75, that's 1968 to 1978, and I will swear blind that was the golden age of modern music. Now, this makes me think that everyone thinks at that time. What would you be listening to then, Heidi?
I was listening to Mariah Carey, the Spice Girls.
Well, there's another golden age of female music, wasn't it?
Yeah. What about you?
Oh, well, of course, you know, the Rolling Stones, the Beatles, Led Zeppelin, Roxy Music, David Bowie, Pink Floyd. You know, it was the golden age of music, as I say. What about you, Martin?
You actually made that comment last week on the HSC program. You said you remember back to your HSC year because of the music of the era.
That's right.
You did.
Yeah.
For me, it was a little bit later. I remember Bad Company and Rolling Stones and all those ones there, but I was in that space of, especially at university, NXS, Cold Chisel, Angels, that sort of space. And I was on a bus with students about, it was only 25 years ago, and 15 years after AC/DC and it was on. They said, "Oh, listen to this guy, he sounds really good." And these were, 15-year-old students on a bus coming back from Orange, and they said it was there's a guy called Mick Jagger, and he's really good. Have you heard of him? So I reckon you trigger those memories with the elderly people, and they'll remember.
That's right, and if we can swing that mic round to Siobhan there. See, to me, that beat that we heard before, Warren Zevon's Werewolves of London, I mean, that is the original, that's the best. But to you, it means something slightly different.
Yeah, you're putting me on the spot. I can't remember the name of the artist that redid it.
Some southerner.
I know exactly who he is.
Used to
Kid
hang
Rock?
around. Kid Rock, that's
Kid
the
Rock.
one. Yeah.
That's the only song of Kid Rock that I actually know. So, I guess my answer to what I would be listening to bring back memories, being 25 myself currently, that basically means what I was listening to the last 10 years. It would be a lot of Korean music.
A lot of Korean music.
But if you want to look back to when I was like a kid growing up, I think the most influential music, or the music we listened to the most in my house, was a lot of 80s music. We're a big 80s family.
Okay. Well, there you go. So you've got all that to work from then, Andrew.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's funny you mentioned stuff like the Rolling Stones, because they're a pretty staple in the aged care circuit, actually.
Is that right?
It is, yeah.
I'm looking forward
to it. Yeah.
That's right. And here's the interesting thing. Unfortunately, the age at which people are diagnosed with dementia these days is actually decreasing. So you'll get a lot of younger people that come to these places because there isn't really any other places that families can turn to essentially facilitate their needs, and these places are honestly the places that are tailored and built for people suffering with dementia and living with it are actually fantastic these days. They're much more catered to the making sure that their lives are nurtured and enriched, and they have a lot of basically love. I mean, you walk through these places and they'll paint the doors to their rooms the same as they are at their house.
In fact, there's a whole science now going into the design of these facilities as well, so that no matter where you walk in the facility, you end up in the common room.
That's right, and it's that's just part of the package. And I guess the music therapy is part of that whole essentially enablement for all these residents, and they can feel like they're essentially at home, even even though they're not, and they do get the care they need. There's obviously been a lot of negative, you hear about a lot of negative press with aged care, and particularly with like dementia cases, things like that, but it's actually I'd say it's actually quite progressive, and the way that they're building essentially activities for all these different residents is fantastic, and they're just starting to really hit their stride, I think, and I think it's going to be much better for future generations that have to deal with this.
Oh, thank God! You know, I'm just waiting for them to build the Jimi Hendrix Memorial Rest Home as well, so I can put my bed in there.
It's all right. They'll give you some virtual goggles, and away you go. You'll be at Woodstock.
I'm looking forward to it, and it must be like personally very pleasing to be involved in. Well, it seems like a lot of joy.
It's fantastic. I like to laugh that when I do my usual gigs, and they're fantastic on the weekends, the shows, the amount of applause I get is much more diminished than the amount of applause I would get in a general facility in the week, unfortunately.
Is that right? But they would be also applauding, they'd be applauding the experience they were having as well.
That's right.
Yeah,
I mean,
the return of joy.
That's right. You might not be getting, you're essentially like, we go back to atmosphere, they're applauding the fact that they feel happy and they feel comfortable, and they like that what you're doing is making them feel happy.
I feel like I want to go on one of these courses.
It's quite a nice thing to do. I really, really enjoy, essentially, I mean, I call it a job, and it's definitely hard work. It's different to playing a show. You've got to be involved. You've got to be making sure that the people are responsive and talking to you and coming back. Yeah.
Okay, look, we're just, it looks as though we're running out of time once again. So if people want to find out more about Sing Us a Song, what do they do?
They can look on that world famous search engine called Google, and look up for Sing Us a Song Music Therapy and Wellbeing. We're first cab on the rank there if you type that in. But if you're looking for music therapy in general, it's a fantastic thing, and if there's any people that are staff that work at aged care facilities and are thinking about adopting these style programs, they are 100% worth it.
Okay. Well, thanks for your time this afternoon, Andrew Dyce of Sing Us Your Song, and we're going to go out with some more Halloween music. This is some of my favourite. This is Tito and the Tarantulas, After Dark.
Isn't it true that I can't remember if it was the dementia place, but they made it so the exits don't exit?
You can't exit, no.
Yeah.
They look like windows.
Yeah.
So
Well, the lady that designed abattoirs in America, she's autistic, and she then moved on from designing abattoirs to designing old folks' homes, because it's all to do with movement around it. I'm trying to think of her name. Very famous woman.
yeah, it promotes wandering, because people tend to wander when they have dementia, so they'll walk in the sofas.
Yeah, and if they're at all like me, then they find themselves in a room thinking, why am I here?
Yeah.
Well,
what am I doing in this room?
There's an actual, like, there is a specific reason why you can walk through a door and be like, what was I trying to do in this room? And there's, like, it's an actual thing.
Yeah.
I just can't remember what it's called, but it's the doorway almost creates a separate thought.
The explanation I heard was that moving from the forest to the savannah, you have to leave behind all your forest knowledge and, you know, reload your savannah knowledge.
Okay, yeah, that's a good analogy. I like that one.
So when you go through a doorway, you throw out that room, but unfortunately you throw out the reason you were going through the doorways.
I like that explanation.
Yeah.
I read that because originally people used to think like doing
Can we
Sudoku
do
help.
the
Doing Sudoku
the
help
photo
with
thing now?
dementia,
Yeah.
but now
Is
they're
that-
thinking
Yeah, I'll
language
turn it
learning
off
because
now.
you have to use different parts of your
Of the
brain.
brain.
With
Yeah.
Andrew. We'll get
To,
some photos with Andrew. Is